The heat inside the kitchen was overwhelming, a blend of boiling pots, sizzling pans, and sharp shouts that cut through the clatter of knives against cutting boards. It was the kind of chaos that only made sense to those who lived in it every day. For Jamal Carter, 19 years old and standing ankle-deep in soapy water with sweat running down his forehead, this was survival. His station was the dish pit in the back of Moretti's, a well-known Manhattan restaurant where the head chef's temper was as famous as his risotto. Jamal's hands moved fast, scrubbing, rinsing, stacking, his arms aching, but his mind wandering to the smells drifting from the line: garlic, butter, seared beef, rosemary, fragments of an art he longed to master. Then it happened. The clang of a pot hitting the floor silenced the room for a second. Chef Richard Moretti turned, eyes narrowing at Jamal, who had instinctively bent down to pick it up. "Hey, don't you dare touch that!" Moretti barked, his voice slicing through the noise. Every pair of eyes turned. Jamal froze. "You'll never touch my dishes," the chef spat, stepping closer, his face flushed from heat and ego. "Stick to the sink, that's all you're good for." Laughter broke out among a few of the line cooks, nervous but sharp enough to sting. Jamal stood there, pot in hand, his chest tight. The shame burned hotter than the steam rising around him. He wanted to defend himself, to say something, but the words stuck in his throat. Moretti snatched the pot away and returned to his station, barking orders as if nothing had happened. The moment lingered, though. It settled into Jamal's skin like a brand, a memory he couldn't shake. And it was in that precise humiliation, in the sting of those words, that something sparked. A voice deep inside whispered, "Prove him wrong." Before we go deeper into Jamal's story, his struggles, his triumphs, and the long road from the dish pit to the head of the kitchen, take a moment to subscribe. These are stories of resilience, of turning adversity into strength, and you don't want to miss what comes next. Back at the sink, Jamal forced his hands back into the water, scrubbing harder than before. The laughter around him faded as the night wore on, but his mind replayed the insult again and again. The clang of pans, the hiss of oil, the chef's booming orders, none of it could drown out the words, "You'll never touch my dishes." But Jamal had always been the kind of person who learned from fire, who grew tougher under pressure. His mother used to tell him that storms were only temporary, and that strength came from what you chose to build afterward. Standing in that cramped dish pit, surrounded by steam and grease, Jamal began to build something no one else could see yet, a quiet determination. He started noticing more that night. The way the sauté cook lifted the pan and let flames kiss the meat, the precise flick of the wrist when garnishing plates, the almost musical rhythm of knives on the cutting boards. Every detail etched itself into his memory, not as an outsider looking in, but as someone preparing for a future no one expected of him. When the last plate was washed and the lights dimmed, Jamal lingered. He glanced once more at the empty line where chefs had performed their art hours earlier. The counters still smelled of fresh herbs and charred meats. He imagined himself there, leading, creating, not as the boy in the back, but as the man who proved them all wrong. And though his journey had only just begun, the seed was planted that night, deep and unshakable. What had been meant as an insult would become the very fuel of his transformation. Before Jamal Carter ever set foot in that Manhattan kitchen, his life had been shaped by resilience and quiet strength. Born in Atlanta, Georgia, he grew up in a small apartment with peeling paint on the walls and the constant hum of traffic outside. His mother, Denise, carried the weight of two jobs, nurse's aide during the day and cashier at a grocery store by night. Jamal rarely saw her sit down, but when she did, it was often at a kitchen table with bills spread out like an endless puzzle. Despite the hardships, there was warmth in his childhood. That warmth came most often from his grandmother, Loretta, who lived just a few blocks away. She was a woman of strong faith and stronger flavors, her tiny kitchen always alive with smells of cornbread baking, collard greens simmering, and chicken frying in cast-iron skillets that seemed older than time. Jamal spent hours beside her, watching, learning, and tasting. She had a way of turning food into memory, weaving stories into every bite. "Cooking," she used to say, her hands dusted with flour, "ain't just about filling bellies, it's about filling hearts." Remember that, boy." Those words stuck with him. While other kids dreamed of sneakers or video games, Jamal dreamed of dishes, how spices blended, how flavors transformed. He'd sketch little drawings of plates in the corners of his school notebooks, often hiding them when the teacher walked past. Still, reality was heavy. His neighborhood wasn't forgiving, and opportunities were scarce. He saw friends get swallowed by the streets, pulled into cycles of trouble he wanted no part of. Jamal found escape in two places: basketball at the local court and the kitchen with his grandmother. The court gave him an outlet for energy, but the kitchen gave him a sense of belonging, of purpose. When Loretta passed away during his senior year of high school, Jamal felt like the ground had cracked beneath him. The loss was deep, but her memory pushed him to dream bigger. He told himself that one day he'd make her proud by turning the lessons she taught him into something real. After graduation, with no money for college and no clear plan, he decided to head north. New York had always been painted in his mind as the city where anything was possible. He scraped together what little savings he had, packed a duffel bag, and boarded a bus bound for Harlem. The ride was long, filled with restless sleep and quiet fear, but also a fire that wouldn't die. Landing in New York was a shock. The city pulsed with noise, sirens, voices, horns, music spilling out of corner shops. The energy was thrilling and intimidating at once. Jamal found a room in a shared apartment with 3 other young men, none of them strangers to struggle. The place smelled faintly of old carpet and takeout containers, but it was a start. He worked odd jobs at first, stocking shelves, unloading delivery trucks, before landing at Moretti's as a dishwasher. It wasn't glamorous, but it was steady, and most importantly, it was inside a real kitchen. Each night he returned to his cramped room exhausted, hands raw from scrubbing, but his notebook of recipes continued to grow. He scribbled down ideas inspired by the scents that drifted from the line. Roasted garlic reminded him of Sunday dinners with Loretta, while the tang of fresh tomatoes sent him back to summers in Atlanta. One evening his mother called from Atlanta, her voice tired but proud. "Baby, you just keep going. Don't let nobody tell you what you can't do." Jamal held onto those words as tightly as he had once held his grandmother's hand. Though his apron said dishwasher and his station was the sink, Jamal knew deep down that his story wouldn't end there. The city was vast, the odds stacked high, but his dreams burned brighter than the neon lights above Harlem's streets. The memory of Loretta's kitchen lived inside him still, and it whispered one thing: keep cooking, no matter what. The kitchen at Moretti's wasn't just a workplace, it was a battlefield ruled by order, speed, and the iron fist of hierarchy. Everyone had their place, and stepping outside it was like stepping into fire. At the top stood Chef Richard Moretti, the undisputed commander. His reputation was built on years of old-school training in Italy and New York, and he carried himself with the pride of a man who believed his word was law. His booming voice controlled the room, and when he snapped, everyone jumped. Below him were the sous chefs, the generals of the brigade, translating Moretti's demands into precise orders. They managed timing, plating, and coordination, their eyes constantly scanning for mistakes. Line cooks filled the middle ranks, young, hungry, and often battered by the relentless pace. They worked the stations like soldiers at war, grill, sauté, pastry, each one handling their piece of the orchestra. The lowest rung was the dish pit, where Jamal spent his hours, invisible unless something went wrong. In that world, respect wasn't handed out. It was fought for plate by plate. Mistakes weren't just corrected, they were punished with curses sharp enough to wound. Moretti thrived on intimidation, pacing between stations, his chef's coat spotless even in the chaos. He believed fear kept people sharp. 2 risottos, fire them now, he barked one evening, his voice echoing over the sizzle of pans. Yes, chef, the line cook answered, already sweating as he rushed to obey. Jamal from his corner watched the exchange. He noticed how everyone answered in unison, as if rehearsed, their tone carrying both respect and fear. It was a culture that demanded perfection at all costs. But while others focused on survival, Jamal's eyes studied. He noticed how garlic was added at just the right second, how butter was swirled gently into sauces, how garnishes transformed plates from simple food to art. He memorized movements like a student taking mental notes in class. Still, he knew his place. Hands in the sink, sleeves rolled up, eyes down whenever Moretti walked by. Yet curiosity sometimes betrayed him. One late night, during prep, Jamal edged closer to a cutting board stacked with fresh vegetables. The colors fascinated him, the deep green of basil, the bright red of tomatoes glistening under the kitchen lights. Almost without thinking, he picked up a knife and tried slicing an onion. "Hey, what do you think you're doing?" a line cook sneered, snatching the knife away. "This ain't your job, dishwasher," Jamal muttered an apology, retreating to his corner, cheeks burning. That moment stuck with him, another reminder of the invisible wall between him and the dream he carried. The hierarchy was more than roles, it was survival. Those on the line guarded their stations jealously, knowing any slip could mean losing their spot. Ambition was welcome, but only if you had already earned your place. For Jamal, ambition looked like arrogance in their eyes, and arrogance in Moretti's kitchen was crushed. Still, there were moments when Jamal couldn't help but lean closer, listening to the cadence of instructions. Deglaze with wine, not too much. Plate it clean, faster, faster. Each word felt like a lesson disguised as a command. He soaked it in silently, his hands working double time on dishes while his mind stayed on the line. At night, when the kitchen emptied and the silence replaced the chaos, Jamal sometimes lingered. He'd glance at the gleaming knives, the prep stations wiped clean, the aroma of herbs still lingering in the air. That world felt both unreachable and magnetic, like a locked door he couldn't stop staring at. He returned to his tiny apartment with the smell of grease clinging to his clothes, his notebook open on the desk. He wrote what he'd seen, how the sous chef had balanced acidity with sweetness, how the grill cook timed the sear by instinct rather than clock. It was all out of reach, yet he was learning piece by piece, dish by dish. The hierarchy may have kept him in the shadows, but shadows could be powerful places for those who knew how to observe, and Jamal was watching more closely than anyone realized, quietly preparing for a day no one believed would come. The nights in the kitchen were endless marathons of noise, pressure, and exhaustion. For Jamal, hidden in the dish pit, the chaos became a rhythm he knew by heart. Scrape, wash, rinse, stack, repeat. He was used to being invisible, but someone had been watching him, someone who saw more than the quiet dishwasher with tired eyes and soaked sleeves. Maria Gonzalez had worked her way up from prep cook to sous chef. She was 30, sharp-eyed, and carried herself with the confidence of someone who had fought for every step forward. Her accent hinted at her roots in Queens, where she had grown up helping her parents run a small deli. Unlike Moretti, she didn't raise her voice to dominate. Her authority came from skill and steady hands that could calm even the most frantic line. One night, after service slowed, she noticed Jamal standing at the edge of the prep station, watching intently as she finished plating a halibut dish with lemon butter sauce. His gaze wasn't casual, it was focused, almost hungry. She set the plate aside, wiped her hands and tilted her head. "You always stare like that?" she asked. Jamal blinked, embarrassed. "Sorry, I didn't mean to. It looked nice." Maria chuckled softly. "Food isn't about looking nice, it's about tasting right. But you've got the eyes of someone who wants to learn." He hesitated, unsure if it was safe to admit. I don't belong here. At least not on that side of the kitchen." She studied him for a moment, then lowered her voice. "Don't let anyone tell you where you belong. Especially not Moretti. He's got talent, sure, but he's stuck in his own arrogance." Her words hit Jamal harder than he expected. Most people in the kitchen ignored him or laughed when he showed curiosity. Maria, though, wasn't dismissing him. She was inviting him to keep looking closer. Over the next weeks, she started slipping him little opportunities. At the end of service, she'd gather scraps, half a tomato, an onion, leftover herbs, and quietly set them aside. "Take these home," she'd whisper. "Practice. Burn your hands, make mistakes, figure it out." Jamal would nod, gratitude swelling in his chest. He carried those ingredients back to Harlem, experimenting late into the night in his cramped kitchen. Sometimes the results were disasters: sauces too salty, chicken too dry, vegetables cut unevenly. But he remembered Maria's advice. Make mistakes, figure it out. Slowly he began to taste progress. One evening, after scrubbing his last pot, Maria stopped him before he left. She handed him a paring knife, its handle worn but sharp enough to be useful. "This was my first knife," she said. "Didn't have money for better back then. Keep it. Learn to control it. It's not the tool, it's the hand that holds it." Jamal stared at the knife, speechless. "Why are you doing this?" he finally asked. Maria shrugged, though there was warmth in her eyes. "Because I see how you watch, and because somebody once helped me when I was just another nobody in a kitchen. You've got potential, Jamal. Don't waste it." For the first time since starting at Moretti's, Jamal felt like he wasn't alone. Someone believed in him, someone who understood what it meant to fight for a place in a world that tried to shut doors. That night, as he walked home with the knife tucked safely in his bag, he felt a fire growing inside him. In a kitchen where hierarchy kept him chained to the sink, Maria had given him a key, one forged not of privilege but of trust. It wasn't freedom yet, but it was a beginning. And beginnings, Jamal knew, could change everything. The nights in Harlem grew colder as fall settled over the city, but inside Jamal's tiny apartment, the air was thick with steam and the smell of experiments gone wrong. On the chipped countertop, a scattering of onions, garlic and peppers lay beside Maria's worn paring knife. Jamal wiped sweat from his forehead as he leaned over a pan that hissed too violently. The sauce he had tried to create clung stubbornly to the bottom, threatening to burn. "Damn," he muttered under his breath, quickly scraping the pan before smoke filled the room. It wasn't the first time he had messed up, and it wouldn't be the last. Still, every failure pushed him further. He remembered his grandmother's voice, steady, patient, forgiving. Cooking ain't about being perfect. It's about love and patience. He tried to breathe that in as he plated his dish, sautéed vegetables over rice, unevenly cut but full of color. The first bite was harsh with too much salt, yet somewhere under the mistake was a hint of something good. He chewed slowly, scribbling notes in the margins of his notebook. Less salt, softer onions, balance heat with sweetness. Each night became a ritual. He'd stumble home exhausted from the sink, drop his bag and dive into practice. His neighbors sometimes knocked on the thin walls, complaining about the smell of burnt food. Jamal would laugh softly to himself, promising silently that one day the same smells would make people line up outside a restaurant. His curiosity was no longer silent. At work, he asked subtle questions, testing the waters. When a cook was chopping herbs, Jamal leaned closer. "Why do you add parsley at the end?" he asked one evening. The cook glanced at him, half amused, half irritated. "Because if you cook it too long, it loses flavor. You should know that. Oh wait, you're just the dishwasher." The words stung, but Jamal stored the answer anyway. That was how it always went, mockery on the surface, knowledge hidden underneath. He refused to let pride keep him from learning. One late shift, Maria found him scrubbing with a faraway look in his eyes. "You're thinking about flavors again, aren't you?" she asked, smirking. He grinned sheepishly. "Can't help it. I see the way you all move out there, and I just want to try." Maria leaned against the counter. "Then keep trying. You'll burn a lot, mess up a lot, but every failure is part of the recipe. Trust me, I've ruined more soups than I can count." Her encouragement fueled him. That night, Jamal went home with a bag of scraps she had set aside, wilted carrots, a half lemon, some parsley stems. He turned them into a rough broth, filling his small kitchen with a smell that made him close his eyes and imagine Loretta standing beside him, nodding in approval. Still, the road was far from smooth. More than once, Jamal grew frustrated enough to slam a spoon on the counter. "Why can't I get this right?" he shouted to the empty room. But even in anger, he tasted again, adjusted, wrote notes. He refused to quit. A call from his mother one evening reminded him why. "How you holding up, baby?" she asked, her voice worn but full of love. "I'm learning," he replied softly. "I'm not there yet, but I'm learning." "That's all you need to do. Keep learning. The rest will come." Her faith steadied him. With every dish, Jamal's curiosity stretched wider, turning into something sharper. Ambition. He wasn't satisfied with just watching anymore. He wanted to create, to transform, to bring people together the way his grandmother had. And though his attempts often ended in smoke or over-seasoned stews, he began to notice progress. The knife Maria had given him no longer felt awkward in his hand. His cuts grew cleaner, his flavors more balanced, his notebook thicker with notes and ideas. The mistakes still came, but alongside them came the first flickers of confidence. Jamal was no longer just dreaming. He was practicing, failing, and slowly, unmistakably, growing. The kitchen was at its loudest on Friday nights, when every seat in Moretti's was full and the line cooked with an intensity that bordered on madness. Orders piled up, voices clashed, and the air grew so hot it felt impossible to breathe. Jamal kept his head down, scrubbing pans, but his ears and eyes were always open, drawn to the rhythm of the line like a moth to flame. That evening, he noticed a crate of carrots set to the side, still unpeeled. The prep cook had been pulled to help on sauté, and the pile sat untouched. Jamal hesitated, then glanced around. No one was watching closely. With careful movements, he grabbed a carrot and began to peel, mimicking the speed he'd seen Maria use. The knife Maria had given him felt steady in his hand, and for a brief moment, he felt like more than just the dishwasher. But his luck didn't last. Chef Moretti's sharp eyes caught him from across the kitchen. The chef stormed over, his voice booming above the noise. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Jamal froze, knife in hand. I just thought I could help with prep," he stammered. "Help?" Moretti's laugh was bitter. "You think I need help from a dishwasher? Drop that knife right now." The room grew quiet. Cook stopped mid-motion, eyes darting between the chef and the boy by the sink. Jamal set the knife down slowly, shame flooding his chest. Moretti leaned in, his tone cutting. "You're here to wash dishes, not ruin my food. Stick to your station. That's the only place you'll ever belong." The words landed like blows. A few cooks smirked while others looked away uncomfortably. Jamal wanted to speak, to defend himself, but his throat closed tight. He swallowed hard, forcing his hands back into the sink, scrubbing harder as if punishment could erase the humiliation. Later that night, after service ended, Maria found him outside by the back door, sitting on an overturned crate with his head in his hands. The cool air did little to ease the fire in his chest. "You okay?" she asked gently. Jamal shook his head. "He's right. I don't belong out there. I'm just a dishwasher." Maria crossed her arms. "No, you're more than that. Don't let him convince you otherwise. He yells because he's scared of anyone taking his place. That's not your problem." Jamal looked up, frustration clear in his eyes. "But every time I try, I fail. I burn things, I mess up seasoning, and when I try to help here, I get humiliated. Maybe I should just stop." She knelt slightly, her voice firm but kind. "Listen to me. Every great chef has failed, every single one. The difference is whether you quit or you keep going. Failure isn't the end. It's the lesson." Her words settled over him like a balm, though the sting of Moretti's insult still pulsed inside. Jamal clenched his fists, his voice low but determined. "I'll keep going. I don't care how many times he laughs at me. One day I'll stand where he stands." Maria gave him a faint smile. "That's the spirit. Just promise me one thing. Don't let anger be your fuel. Let your hunger and your love for cooking guide you. That's what will make you better than him." Jamal nodded, though inside the fire burned hotter than ever. Moretti's words had pushed him to the edge, but instead of falling, he chose to climb. The breaking point wasn't the end of his dream. It was the start of his vow. As he walked home that night, New York streets buzzing around him, Jamal whispered to himself the promise that would carry him forward. "One day I'll run the kitchen. One day I'll prove him wrong." The city had a way of surprising those who kept their heads down too long. For Jamal, surprise came on a Saturday afternoon in Harlem, where music and laughter spilled onto the streets for the annual neighborhood food festival. He had wandered there after another grueling week at Moretti's, needing fresh air and a reminder of why he still believed in food. The smell of grilled meats, fried dough, and spices blended into the crisp autumn breeze, pulling him in like a magnet. Vendors lined the street, each stall bursting with color and life. Families crowded together, kids ran with plates in their hands, and the rhythm of drums carried through the crowd. Jamal felt at home here, closer to his roots, surrounded by flavors that reminded him of his grandmother's kitchen. He stopped at one booth where a man was frying catfish, the golden crust sizzling as it hit the oil. The smell wrapped around him like memory. As he stood there, he noticed a handwritten sign, Amateur Cooking Contest, open entries. His heart skipped. People were already lining up with trays, some holding carefully prepared dishes, others laughing nervously as they explained what they had made. Jamal hesitated, his palms suddenly damp. He didn't have a dish. He didn't have a plan. But he did have Maria's knife in his bag, and her words echoed in his head. Don't waste your potential. He spotted a small grocery stall at the edge of the festival, selling fresh produce and basic ingredients. Without thinking, he bought a few catfish fillets, cornmeal, and spices. His hands shook as he signed his name onto the contest list. "What you making, young man?" asked one of the organizers, an older woman with a wide smile. Fried catfish," Jamal replied, his voice low. She grinned. "Simple, bold. Let's see if you can pull it off." With only a small portable burner and a borrowed skillet, Jamal worked. He remembered every detail from watching his grandmother, how she seasoned the fish, how she tested the oil with a pinch of cornmeal before dropping the fillets in. The crowd around him grew as the smell of frying catfish rose into the air, golden and crisp. When the judges came by, Jamal's hands trembled as he plated the dish. He added a quick twist, serving the fish with a tangy lemon parsley sauce he had practiced weeks before in his apartment. It wasn't perfect, but it was his. The first judge took a bite, then raised an eyebrow. "Crispy, flavorful, not greasy, nicely done." Another nodded. "I wasn't expecting much from fried fish, but this sauce, that's smart." Jamal exhaled, the tension in his chest breaking into relief. He didn't win first place. That went to a seasoned home cook with a family recipe for jambalaya. But Jamal received honorable mention. More importantly, strangers in the crowd approached him afterward, shaking his hand, complimenting the flavors. "You got talent, kid," one man said. "Keep at it." For Jamal, those words meant more than any ribbon or prize. He walked home with a small certificate tucked under his arm, but it was the validation that mattered. For the first time outside the shadows of Moretti's kitchen, someone had tasted his food and seen his worth. That night, sitting at his kitchen table, Jamal placed the certificate beside his notebook. He traced the letters of his name written in bold ink, his chest swelling with quiet pride. He hadn't conquered anything yet, not Moretti, not the brutal hierarchy of the kitchen, but he had taken a step. And in that small Harlem festival, surrounded by people who loved food as much as he did, Jamal caught a glimpse of what might be possible if he refused to quit. The Harlem festival had left Jamal with more than a certificate. It had left him with a taste of possibility. Days later, as he walked home from Moretti's after a long shift, the streets still buzzing with late-night energy, he stopped by a small diner he often passed, but had never entered. The sign above the door read, "Rosen's Place," the glow of its neon letters flickering faintly against the dark. Something drew him inside. The diner was quiet, with only a handful of customers sipping coffee. The smell of fresh pie lingered in the air, sweet and comforting. Behind the counter stood an older man with silver hair and glasses perched on the edge of his nose. His white apron was stained from a long day's work, but his movements were steady, unhurried. "Evening, kid," the man greeted, his voice warm but roughened by years. "You look like you've had a day." Jamal managed a tired smile. "Something like that. Just finished a shift at Moretti's." The man's brows lifted. "Moretti's? That circus still running the same way?" "You know it?" Jamal asked, surprised. "Know it?" The man chuckled, setting down the dish he was wiping. "I trained Richard Moretti back when he was a skinny kid with more attitude than skill. Name's David Rosen. Retired chef now, just running this little place to keep busy." The words hit Jamal like lightning. Here, in a quiet diner, stood someone who had shaped the very man who now tormented him daily. Jamal hesitated, then asked softly, "What was he like, back then?" Rosen smirked. "Talented but arrogant. Always thought yelling was the only way to lead. Guess some things never change. His eyes narrowed slightly. "Why do you ask?" Jamal hesitated again, then let the truth slip. "Because I want to cook, more than anything. But I'm stuck washing dishes, and every time I try, Moretti shuts me down. I don't have training, I don't have money, just this." He pulled out his notebook, its pages smudged and full of scribbles. Rosen took the book, flipping through the notes with careful eyes. After a moment, he nodded slowly. "You've been paying attention. These aren't the notes of someone just playing around. You've got an eye, maybe even the start of a palate." Hope flickered in Jamal's chest. "You really think so?" "I know so," Rosen said firmly. "But talent isn't enough. You need discipline. You need technique. You need someone to push you harder than you've ever been pushed, and not with shouting, but with standards." Jamal leaned forward. "Will you teach me?" The old chef studied him for a long moment, then sighed, as if weighing the cost. "Teaching takes patience, and patience isn't cheap. You willing to work harder than you've ever worked in your life? Willing to fail, to be corrected, to keep going even when you think you've got nothing left?" "Yes," Jamal answered without hesitation. "I'll do whatever it takes." Rosen cracked a smile. "Good. Meet me here tomorrow night after your shift. Bring that knife you've been using. We'll start with the basics, how to hold it properly, how to respect the blade. If you can't handle that, you can't handle anything else." Relief and determination surged through Jamal all at once. For the first time, he wasn't alone with his notebook and scraps. He had a guide, someone who had walked the very path he dreamed of. As he left the diner that night, the streets of Harlem felt different. The neon lights shone brighter. The air seemed lighter. A door had opened, one he had never expected, and on the other side stood a mentor who might finally turn his raw determination into real skill. The first nights with Chef Rosen were humbling. Jamal arrived at the diner after long shifts at Moretti's, his hands sore and eyes heavy, but Rosen didn't care about excuses. The lessons began with knives, nothing more. "Hold it like this," Rosen instructed, adjusting Jamal's grip. "The knife isn't a weapon, it's an extension of your hand. Respect it." At first, Jamal's cuts were clumsy. Carrots wobbled, onions slipped, and his slices came out uneven. Rosen shook his head, but never raised his voice. Again. 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 Jamal repeated the motion until his shoulders ached, until his fingertips smelled permanently of garlic and herbs. Slowly the cuts grew cleaner, straighter. After weeks, Rosen introduced him to sauces. "Balance," he explained, pointing to a simmering pot. "Too much acid and it bites, too much fat and it drowns. You're not cooking food. You're building harmony." Jamal leaned over the stove, inhaling deeply, recognizing the dance of flavors he had once only guessed at. The victories were small, but real. Jamal's confidence began to take shape in those late nights, reinforced by Rosen's rare nods of approval. One evening, after tasting Jamal's attempt at a tomato sauce, Rosen wiped his mouth and said simply, "Not bad." To Jamal, it felt like a medal. At Moretti's, Maria continued to be his quiet ally. After closing, when the kitchen was empty, she sometimes let him step up to the stove for a few minutes. "Go ahead," she whispered. "Show me what Rosen's teaching you." Jamal would cook quickly, nerves buzzing, plating dishes with care. Maria sampled them honestly. "This needs more salt," she'd say, or, "The flavors are good, but the texture's off." Her feedback was sharp, but her eyes carried pride. Jamal kept learning, caught between the fire of Moretti's cruelty and the steady guidance of Rosen and Maria. One night, while experimenting in the empty kitchen, Jamal prepared a dish close to his heart. Fried chicken inspired by his grandmother, but with a twist of herbs and spices Rosen had introduced him to. Maria took a bite, closed her eyes, and smiled. This is good, really good." Her words lit a fire inside him. For the first time, he felt that his food wasn't just edible. It was something others could enjoy. He scribbled every detail into his notebook, determined to refine it. Word of his hidden talent began to spread quietly among a few staff members. A line cook, usually dismissive, approached him one evening. "Hey, Dishwasher, I heard you're messing with sauces after hours." "That true?" Jamal hesitated, unsure whether it was a trap. Maybe. Why? The cook smirked. Well, don't screw it up. This place could use better food than Moretti's been throwing out lately. It wasn't exactly praise, but it wasn't ridicule either. For Jamal, it felt like a shift, tiny but significant. At home, his experiments became more ambitious. He practiced plating, arranging food on mismatched plates to look elegant. He timed himself, pretending to be on the line during a dinner rush. Some nights, exhaustion nearly broke him, but he reminded himself of Rosen's words. Discipline, not excuses. The small victories piled up, cleaner cuts, balanced sauces, compliments from Maria, and whispered acknowledgement from co-workers. They were not grand achievements, not yet, but to Jamal they were proof that his dream wasn't just fantasy. As he walked home under the Harlem streetlights one night, the air crisp with winter's approach, Jamal felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Momentum. He wasn't at the top, not even close, but for the first time, the climb felt possible. And deep down, he knew these small victories were preparing him for a moment when he would have to prove himself on a much larger stage. Friday nights at Moretti's were chaos wrapped in heat and pressure. The dining room filled to capacity, the waitstaff rushed like clockwork, and the line was a storm of pans, flames, and shouts. Jamal was used to the rhythm from the dish pit, but this night would not stay ordinary for long. Halfway through service, disaster struck. A line cook, red-faced and frustrated, slammed down his tongs. "I'm done! I quit!" he shouted, ripping off his apron before storming out the back door. The kitchen froze for half a second, then erupted as Moretti's fury exploded. "You've got to be kidding me," the chef roared. "We're in the middle of service. Who's going to handle sauté now?" The other cooks exchanged nervous glances. Sauté was one of the busiest stations. Steaks, chicken, fish, all timed perfectly to the second. Without someone there, the kitchen would collapse. Maria's eyes darted to Jamal, who was standing stiff at the dish pit, heart pounding. She took a step forward. "Chef," she said firmly, "let Jamal cover it." Moretti snapped his head toward her. "Are you insane? He's a dishwasher. He'll ruin everything." But the tickets kept printing, the orders piling higher. Maria held her ground. "We don't have time. He's practiced. He can handle it." Jamal's pulse raced. His hands trembled, but something stronger pushed through the fear, the chance he had been waiting for. Moretti glared at him, then spat, "Fine. You screw this up. It's on you." The moment Jamal stepped onto the line, the heat hit him like a wave. Pans flared, butter hissed, garlic burned at the edges. Maria barked instructions over the roar. 2 salmon, 1 chicken. Medium on the steak. Go! Jamal's knife moved fast, his cuts precise thanks to Rosen's drills. He seared the salmon skin side down, resisting the urge to flip too early. The chicken went into another pan, sizzling as he spooned butter and herbs over it. He could feel every eye on him waiting for a mistake. "Don't overcook it," Maria called. "I got it," Jamal shot back, voice steadier than he felt. The first plates went out. Moments later, a server rushed back. "Table 12 says the salmon is perfect." A ripple went through the kitchen. Jamal's chest tightened, not from fear this time, but from pride. He kept moving, finding a rhythm, steak seared, chicken basted, sauces balanced. His notebook and late-night experiments came alive in real time, guiding his hands when nerves threatened to overwhelm him. Moretti hovered nearby, arms crossed, waiting for Jamal to stumble. But dish after dish left the station, and none came back. The cooks beside him, once skeptical, began nodding in quiet approval. Then came the real test, a ticket for 5 entrees, all different, all urgent. Jamal's mind raced. He organized quickly, staggering the timing, seasoning each piece with care. His hands flew, sweat pouring down his forehead, but he didn't falter. Maria kept an eye on him, stepping in only when absolutely necessary. When the plates went out, silence hung for a beat until the servers returned, grinning. They loved it. Jamal exhaled, his arms trembling, adrenaline still coursing through him. He had survived. More than that, he had proven himself under the very fire that had once felt unreachable. For the rest of the night, he worked without hesitation. The rush was exhausting but exhilarating. Every shout, every sizzle, every plated dish reminded him. He wasn't just a dishwasher anymore. He had stepped onto the line, and he had held his own. When service finally ended, the kitchen slumped in relief. Jamal leaned against the counter, chest still heaving. Maria walked by and clapped him on the shoulder. "Told you you could do it." And for the first time, Jamal believed it too. The night Jamal saved the sauté station became a quiet legend among the staff. Some whispered about it with surprise, others with grudging respect. For Jamal, it was a turning point, proof that his long nights of practice were not wasted. But for Chef Moretti, it was a threat. The head chef's pride couldn't handle the idea that the dishwasher had stepped onto his line and succeeded. Instead of acknowledgement, Jamal received sharper glares, harsher words, and impossible tasks designed to trip him up. One evening, Moretti tossed him a tray of vegetables. "Julienne these, perfect matchsticks. You've got 10 minutes. Jamal swallowed his nerves, setting to work with Rosen's lessons steady in his mind. His knife moved fast, precise. When time was up, Moretti inspected the cuts with exaggerated care. He smirked. Too thick, too uneven. Trash them. He dumped the tray into the bin, leaving Jamal's chest hollow with frustration. Later, Moretti cornered him by the walk-in fridge, his voice low and sharp. "Don't think for a second that one lucky night makes you a cook. This is my kitchen. You're nothing but help." Jamal clenched his jaw, forcing himself not to respond. Anger simmered inside, but Maria's warning echoed in his head. "Don't let anger be your fuel." He exhaled slowly, reminding himself that dignity mattered more than snapping back. Still, the tension wore on him. Each shift became a test of endurance, each insult a reminder of the wall he had yet to climb. He confided in Maria during a late-night cleanup. "He's pushing me harder now," Jamal admitted, wiping down the counters. "Not to help me, just to make me quit." Maria looked at him with steady eyes. "And are you going to?" Jamal shook his head. "No, but it's getting harder to keep my cool." She gave a half smile. "Good. Let it get harder. That's how you grow. Pressure makes diamonds, Jamal. Just make sure you don't crack first." At Rosen's diner, the older chef could see the strain on Jamal's face. During a knife drill, Rosen stopped him, resting a hand on the counter. "You look like you're carrying a boulder on your back," Rosen said. Jamal sighed. "Moretti. He won't stop. No matter what I do, it's not good enough." Rosen studied him, then nodded. "That's because it never will be, for him. Some people fear being outshined. Let me tell you something, the harder he pushes, the stronger you're getting. Don't waste your energy trying to win his approval. Cook for yourself. Cook for the people who matter. That's how you'll beat him without even trying." The advice steadied Jamal, but it didn't erase the weight of the daily battles. Moretti's sabotage grew sharper. He once swapped out fresh herbs for wilted ones, waiting for Jamal to use them so he could mock the result. Another time he reassigned Jamal to the dish pit mid-shift, in front of everyone, after he had flawlessly handled a station. Each humiliation cut deep, but Jamal refused to break. Instead, he doubled down on his training. He worked faster, thought sharper, and leaned on Maria and Rosen when doubt threatened to consume him. Yet beneath the surface, a storm brewed. The other cooks began to notice the unfairness, some quietly rooting for Jamal, others staying silent out of fear of Moretti's wrath. The kitchen was shifting, loyalties bending in ways Moretti could not control. Jamal could feel it too, the growing divide, the rising tension, and though he didn't know when, he sensed that a moment would come when the pressure would snap, when the battle between him and Moretti would no longer stay in the shadows. For now, though, Jamal kept his head down, his heart steady, and his promise alive. No matter what Moretti threw at him, he would endure. The tension in Moretti's kitchen had reached a fever pitch when fate decided to intervene. It was a Tuesday night, the kind of evening when the restaurant was half full, quiet enough for the staff to breathe, but busy enough to keep the line sharp. No one expected anything unusual, but at table 7 a man in a tailored suit took a seat alone, pulling out a small leather notebook. The servers whispered his name like it was sacred. "A food critic," one muttered, eyes wide. The word spread quickly, and within minutes, the atmosphere shifted. Moretti straightened his jacket, barking orders with extra venom, determined to prove his dominance. Plates were sent out with obsessive precision, sauces wiped clean from rims, garnishes placed like jewels. The staff knew the stakes. One review could elevate or crush a restaurant's reputation, but perfection slipped. A steak came back overcooked, a risotto underseasoned. Moretti's face darkened with each mistake. "We cannot afford this," he snapped, sweat glistening on his forehead. He doubled down on control, refusing to let anyone take risks. Jamal worked silently at the prep station, chopping herbs, when Maria leaned toward him. "This is our chance," she whispered. He frowned. "Our chance for what?" "To show what you can do." Her eyes flicked toward the critic, who was writing notes between bites. "One dish, that's all it would take." Jamal's stomach clenched. "Are you serious? If Moretti catches me—" "He won't," Maria cut in. "I'll cover you. You've been ready for this." For a moment, fear rooted Jamal in place, but then he remembered the humiliation, the late nights, the endless drills with Rosen. Opportunity didn't knock twice. He nodded slowly. "All right, let's do it." Maria slipped him ingredients under the guise of restocking. Jamal's hands moved quickly, instinct taking over. He chose something simple but powerful. Pan-seared chicken with a sauce that fused his grandmother's southern flavors and Rosen's lessons on balance. Garlic, thyme, a touch of lemon, butter, whisked until silky. The smell rose from the pan, rich and inviting. "Table 7, Maria said softly, sliding the plate onto the tray before Moretti noticed. The critic lifted his fork, taking a bite. His brows furrowed at first, then lifted in surprise. He wrote quickly in his notebook, nodding as he tasted again. Jamal held his breath from across the kitchen, every nerve alive. Moments later, the critic called the server over. "Compliments to the chef," he said with a faint smile. The words spread like wildfire. Moretti puffed out his chest, strutting toward the table. "I'm glad you enjoyed it," he said smoothly. The critic glanced at him, unimpressed. "Not your dish. The chicken. Perfectly balanced, surprising, memorable. That chef deserves the credit." Silence crashed over the kitchen. Moretti froze, his expression stiff. His eyes swept the room, and for the briefest moment they landed on Jamal. Fury flickered in his face, but he forced a smile for the critic, nodding politely before retreating. In the back, Maria squeezed Jamal's shoulder. "You did it!" Jamal's chest swelled with both pride and terror. He had stepped into the light, and there was no going back. Moretti knew, the staff knew, and now, thanks to the critic's words, the world outside would know too. As the night wound down, Jamal washed his hands at the sink, his reflection trembling in the steel. His heart still raced, but under the fear was something undeniable. He had seized the moment, and for the first time, someone outside the kitchen hierarchy had recognized his talent. The opportunity had come, and Jamal had answered. The review hit the papers 3 days later, and it landed like a thunderclap. The critic praised the unexpected brilliance of a chicken dish that balanced tradition with refinement, calling it the only memorable plate of the evening. While the restaurant's reputation survived, the spotlight had shifted. The whispers began immediately. Who had really cooked it? Inside Moretti's tension grew unbearable. Moretti barked louder, cursed harsher, trying to reassert control. But the staff had seen the truth. They knew it hadn't been Moretti who impressed the critic. It had been Jamal. And the more the truth spread, the weaker Moretti's grip became. One afternoon, the restaurant's owner, a sharp-eyed businessman named Leonard Price, called a meeting. He stood in the kitchen with arms crossed, his voice calm but cutting. "I've read the review, I've spoken to the staff, and I want answers. Who made that chicken?" Silence stretched. Moretti's jaw tightened, his face pale with rage. "I did, of course," he lied smoothly. "It was my recipe, my execution. Who else could it have been?" Maria stepped forward before Jamal could speak. "With all due respect, Chef, it wasn't you. Jamal cooked that dish." Gasps echoed through the room. Jamal's chest tightened, but Maria's steady voice gave him courage. He lifted his chin. "It was me. I made it." Leonard studied him, then glanced back at Moretti. Interesting, because I've had multiple accounts from your own staff that confirm the same thing. So tell me, Richard, why lie? Moretti sputtered, his mask cracking. Because he's a dishwasher. He doesn't belong on the line. If you let amateurs run the kitchen, this place will fall apart. Leonard's expression hardened. What will make this place fall apart is arrogance. The critic singled out Jamal's dish as the best of the night. If you were truly leading this team, you'd be proud of that. Instead, you're trying to bury it. The staff exchanged glances, emboldened by the truth being spoken aloud. A line cook muttered, "He's right. Jamal's been putting in the work. Everyone knows it." Moretti's face flushed red. "You ungrateful." He caught himself, but the damage was done. Leonard cut him off. "I've had enough. Richard, your time here is over. Pack up your knives." The words hung heavy in the air. Moretti's eyes widened, disbelief twisting into fury. "You're firing me? After everything I've built?" Leonard didn't flinch. "You built a reputation on talent, yes, but lately, all you've built is resentment. This restaurant needs leadership, not tyranny. Leave." For a long, tense moment, no one moved. Then Moretti slammed his towel onto the counter and stormed out, muttering curses under his breath. The door swung shut behind him, and the kitchen felt lighter, as if a storm had finally passed. Jamal stood frozen, unsure what this meant. He had spent so long surviving under Moretti's shadow that freedom felt unreal. Leonard turned to him. "You've shown promise, Jamal, real promise. But don't think for a second this means the climb is over. It only gets harder from here. Are you ready for that?" Jamal swallowed, his voice steady despite the weight of the moment. "Yes, sir. I'm ready." Maria's smile was faint, but full of pride. The staff murmured quietly, some clapping Jamal on the back. For the first time, respect wasn't whispered behind closed doors, it was given openly. That night, as Jamal walked home through the cool streets of Manhattan, the city lights seemed brighter. Moretti was gone. The path ahead was uncertain, steep, and demanding, but it was finally clear. Jamal had survived the storm, and now the climb towards something greater had truly begun. The departure of Richard Moretti left a vacuum in the kitchen, one that could have unraveled the restaurant completely. But instead of chaos, something unexpected happened. The staff began to look to Jamal. At first it was subtle, someone asking his opinion on seasoning, another deferring to him during prep. Slowly the shift became undeniable. The dishwasher, who once stood in the shadows, was stepping into the light. Leonard, the owner, wasted no time addressing the change. A week after Moretti's firing, he called Jamal into his office. The room was small but elegant, the kind of place where decisions carried weight. Leonard leaned back in his chair, studying Jamal with sharp eyes. "You've proven you have talent," Leonard said. "But talent without consistency is nothing. I need leaders here, not flashes of brilliance. That means responsibility, long hours, and expectations you've never faced before. Do you want that burden?" Jamal's throat tightened, but he met Leonard's gaze. "Yes, I want it. More than anything." Leonard nodded. "Then I'll start you as sous chef. Earn the trust of this team. Show me you can run a station, then we'll talk about more." The title alone made Jamal's heart race. From dishwasher to sous chef, it felt like a lifetime of struggle compressed into a single leap. But he knew Leonard was right. This wasn't victory yet, only a harder test. The adjustment was brutal. Jamal found himself managing stations he had once only observed. Timing, plating, delegating, every decision carried weight. The pressure was suffocating, but he remembered Rosen's words, discipline, not excuses. When doubts crept in, he forced himself to push through. Maria stood by his side, steady and loyal. "You've got this," she reminded him during the first nights he ran the line. "Don't second guess. Trust your instincts." And slowly, Jamal's instincts sharpened. His dishes began to carry his identity. Southern roots layered with modern balance. Fried chicken with herb-infused oils. Collard greens elevated with a citrus twist. Catfish paired with delicate sauces. Customers noticed. Compliments filtered back to the kitchen more often, servers smiling as they relayed praise. Within months, Leonard made it official. Jamal Carter was named head chef of Moretti's. The announcement drew cheers from the staff, who had long watched his journey from the sink to the stove. The first night he wore the title, Jamal barely slept. He paced his small apartment, rehearsing orders in his mind, reviewing every recipe he had practiced. When dawn came, he stood in front of the mirror, staring at his reflection. Gone was the boy humiliated in front of a kitchen. In his place stood a man carrying both the weight and pride of leadership. That evening, as the dinner rush began, Jamal stood at the pass calling orders with a steady voice. 2 steaks, 1 salmon, fire them now. The cooks answered in unison. No mockery, no hesitation, only respect. When the first plates went out, Jamal's chest swelled. He glanced at the gleaming dishes, remembering the cruel words that had once defined him. "You'll never touch my dishes." And yet here he was, not only touching them but commanding them, shaping them, sending them out to be remembered. Maria caught his eye across the line and gave a small nod. It was all the validation he needed. By the end of the night, Jamal stood in the quiet kitchen, the rush behind him, the air heavy with lingering aromas of herbs and seared meats. He closed his eyes and let the moment sink in. He had climbed from the lowest rung to the very top, not through shortcuts but through grit, humility and unshakable belief. The journey wasn't over, far from it, but the dishwasher had become the chef. Years passed, but Jamal never forgot the heat of the dish pit, the sting of humiliation, or the fire that pushed him forward. By the time he reached 30, he was no longer just the head chef of Moretti's. He was the proud owner of his own restaurant in Harlem. The sign above the door read, "Carter's Table," bold letters glowing warmly against the night sky. Inside, the air carried a blend of southern comfort and modern refinement, a harmony that told his story with every bite. The dining room was alive with laughter, clinking glasses and the aroma of dishes crafted from Jamal's memories. Catfish served with delicate sauces, fried chicken elevated with herbs, collard greens kissed with citrus. Each plate was a bridge between his grandmother's kitchen and the lessons he had earned through struggle. On opening night, Jamal's mother sat at a table near the front. Her hands trembled as she held the menu, eyes misty with pride. "Baby," she whispered when Jamal came to greet her, "you did it. You really did it." He bent down, kissing her forehead. "I couldn't have without you, Mama. Every bit of this started with you and Grandma." The moment was heavy with love, a circle completed. Jamal felt the weight of his journey lift, replaced by gratitude. In the kitchen, the staff worked under his leadership, not out of fear but respect. Many of them were young dishwashers and prep cooks, faces full of the same hunger he once carried. Jamal made it his mission to treat them with dignity, to give them the chances he had once been denied. One evening, a nervous teenager approached him after service, wringing his hands. "Chef, do you think you could show me how you made that sauce tonight?" Jamal smiled, recognizing the spark in the boy's eyes. "Of course. Come by tomorrow after we close. We'll go through it step by step." Moments like that defined his legacy. He wasn't just cooking food, he was shaping futures, just as Rosen and Maria had done for him. Speaking of Rosen, the retired chef still visited often, sitting at the bar with a slice of pie. He'd watch Jamal work, pride hidden behind his gruff demeanor. "Not bad, kid," he'd mutter, though his eyes gave away more than his words. Maria, too, remained by his side, a trusted friend and partner in the kitchen. Together, they built Carter's Table into more than a restaurant. It became a community hub, a place where culture, tradition, and ambition met on the plate. One night, as Jamal wiped down the counters after service, he thought back to Moretti's words, "You'll never touch my dishes." He chuckled softly to himself. Not only had he touched them, he had redefined them. The insult that once cut deep had become fuel, transformed into triumph. Looking out into the empty dining room, Jamal whispered, "We did it, Grandma. We really did it." The memory of Loretta's warm kitchen lived on in every plate he served, a legacy carried forward in flavors that spoke louder than words. Before we close Jamal's story, let me ask you, If this journey of resilience and transformation moved you, subscribe now to stay with us for more stories of strength and triumph. And don't stop here. Click on the suggested video waiting for you on the screen to keep the inspiration alive. Because like Jamal's rise from the dish pit to head chef, there are countless stories that prove no setback is final when determination keeps burning. Jamal's legacy was never just about food. It was about dignity, perseverance, and the belief that no dream is too small to grow into something extraordinary.